I'm going to begin, Tom, by asking, of course, with the Damn United, the King's Speech, and obviously now the Danish Girl, you seem to have been drawn to sort of real historical events, and always presented them. They're very much about one person, but never presented as a sort of biopic. I was wondering what it is about this particular kind of area of filmmaking that appeals to you, and why you have always veered away from a traditional biopic.
It's interesting. I mean, I think the writer Peter Morgan deserves a lot of credit for this kind of reinvention of what the biopic can be, because if you look at the two films we did together, which was The Damned United and Longford, or films of his like Frost Nixon and the Queen, I feel like he was in part responsible for this idea of saying, rather than try to tell a kind of cradle to grave story of a life, what if you hone in on a particular time phase or a particular relationship? The King's Speech, written by David Sider, was an example of that you kind of organise a very complex period of history through looking at a very particular prism. I think I gravitate towards these stories partly because I find it very hard to find really, really great scripts, and these happen to be the best scripts I've come across, and The Danish Girl is no exception. It was one of the best scripts I've ever read. Incredibly moving love story at the centre. I couldn't believe this couple existed and were, they were so pioneering and so courageous. It was impossible to say no.
And you've said that Eddie Redmayne came into your head the second you did read the screenplay. What was it about him then as an actor, his sensibilities that you felt was perfect?
Well, I knew him quite well because I directed him in Elizabeth I with Helen Mirren and Jeremy Irons. He was playing a young rebel who tries to overthrow Queen Helen Mirren and is sentenced to death, obviously. And shooting that scene where he received the death sentence, he revealed a kind of emotional rawness and a vulnerability and a almost emotional transparency that was kind of remarkable. And so I'd sort of, I'd from that moment on, I'd been wanting to find something else to do with him. We did Les Mis together. His Empty Chairs, Empty Tables, to me, remains one of the highlights. So partly it's this sort of this kind of emotional transparency he has that I think is very exciting, but then there was a part of it that was drawn to the feminine. I mean, he played the girls' parts in school plays. His first professional job was playing Violet in Mark Rylance's Twelfth Night. So there was something in him that was drawn to the feminine, and I thought it'd be interesting to give him the chance to explore that more deeply.
Of course, Nicole Kidman was initially in line to play the role of Lily. I mean, I read, obviously, that was before your time, but were you always open to the idea of having a woman play the role?
Yes, I mean, if you think about Transamerica, Felicity, I think, played that role. So, given we're saying that Lily was always a woman, I think it's equally interesting choice. I mean, I felt on balance that because Lily's translation in our movie happens quite late, for the majority of the film she presents as a man, she presents as Einar. That's the reason I went the way I did.
And I mean, when you're dealing with two such remarkable painters at the core of your story, does that add a pressure on you to create an indelible visual experience? And did you use their art to help kind of inform the tone and aesthetic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I together with my cinematographer Danny Kern, we wanted to get inside the mind's eye of these two great artists. And of course, one, Lily, when she was Einar, was a landscape painter, so was fascinated in capturing the beauty of the wide shot of the landscape, and then Gerda Vayner was fascinated by capturing the beauty of the close-up of the portrait, of particularly women in portrait, and Lily herself. So, the two artists to me represented the twin pillars of filmmaking, the wide shot and the close-up, and their pursuit of beauty led me to feel like beauty needed to hover over the movie because it was something that preoccupied them, and also symbolically to me sort of represented the promise at the end of Lily's journey, that the sense, the promise of happiness, the promise of a sense of unity with the world.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey